My name is Alex Joyce, and I'm a principal at Craig & Associates, an urban planning firm based in Portland, and we're delighted to be here working on this project and delighted to be at the third open house. The presentation tonight really, the material is really reflected on the boards, but we wanted to have an opportunity to kind of explain what the heck it all means and go into it in a little bit more detail. And then if there's questions after the presentation, we're going to be at the boards so that we can hone in on any issues you may have with you in person. So we'll do questions that way. But if you have a clarifying question as I go through it, by all means, ask and see if we can't get it answered. So an overview of what we want to cover tonight. So we want to talk a little bit about where we've been. We've covered a lot of ground in terms of public engagement and analysis, and we just want to refresh you on that, so that because that's the springboard for where we are today. We want to talk about just quickly review the plan outline. So the meat of the plan is before you tonight, the proposal in draft form. The plan itself is being drafted currently, although obviously we want to get input and direction as we finalize that process. The real where the rubber meets the road is where with the implementation strategies and policy recommendations, which is much of the material that we'll cover tonight, and the transportation and infrastructure investment and improvements, which are all part of creating the next life of Highway 99 in this area. So, and then we'll take questions and wrap up and kind of go over where we are in the overall process and what's coming up. So generally, I think we're all sort of familiar with the project area. It's a 2-mile stretch along Highway 99 in Edmonds, highlighted here in blue and also on one of the boards. One of the things that came up both in previous planning efforts, but also as part of this effort, was that a sense of identity was really needed on Highway 99, so you knew where you were, and so some organizing principles came up that in the south end of the corridor, there's an opportunity to really present, we've arrived in Edmonds and the Edmonds stretch of Highway 99, so the Gateway District, right? So emphasizing that you've arrived and a sense of place there. There's an international district. There's already lots of businesses that are grocery stores and restaurants. We want to reinforce that area of Highway 99 and engage with folks there to figure out what the next chapter for that stretch of Highway 99 is, but that's the international district. And then obviously the health district where we are right now. So there's an opportunity to think about associated industries that are complementary to health and also nurture that critical employer in our city. The analysis portion of the process identified several things. So identified not only where we already have pretty good urban bones, where we have good street connectivity, where we have already have a lot of economic activity, but it also identified where we have some missing legs of the stool. So there are stretches of 99 where there's a very long way before you can safely cross Highway 99. So that was identified as an issue that we wanted to address in the plan. So we did a lot of computer modeling and walking tours to figure out what was working and what wasn't working. And that, along with the public workshop information and testimony, has shaped where we are today. So as you can see, there's some stretches of 99 where safe crossings could benefit the pedestrians and folks walking to school and the like. In March, we had a public workshop. This is an opportunity for probably a lot of you, actually, to share what your vision for this stretch of 99 should be, both in terms of what are the transportation improvements that are going to make this place better and safer from the pedestrian point of view, from bicycles accessing and crossing Highway 99, from transit users' perspective, and also safe and more predictable auto movements, because there's a lot of auto conflicts that exist on Highway 99. But in addition to that, not just stopping at the road, but what's the future of the land use, and what are the land use opportunities? So both land use and transportation visions were established in that process, in that workshop. Some of the outcomes, there's clearly a desire for additional housing options on and around Highway 99. Mixed use, the idea of mixed use is not new to this region, but it is a rather new concept in terms of this particular area, but there's a desire to see more mixed use that includes residential uses and office uses above ground floor retail uses. There was very specific recommendations on needed improvements for pedestrian enhancements. So you can see where these hotspots came up. So this is where a lot of people put down chips repeatedly and told us loud and clear that we needed to strengthen connections in some of these areas. The community values that are really our touchstones as we have progressed along the process are about connectivity, both along the corridor, but across the corridor and accessing destinations on the corridor, reinforcing the destinations that exist today, but also thinking about what are the new destinations we want to see achieved on Highway 99. Beautification was a big one. So right now there's opportunities to think through medians that are landscaped and introduce tree canopy, make it a more pleasant place to both drive and walk and use transit. Safety and walkability, obviously there's been some high profile pedestrian incidents on the corridor, so we want to make sure that whatever we do has an emphasis on safety and ensures that walking is a very safe thing to do. Affordable housing, obviously in this region, is a major concern, and this may be an opportunity to think about affordable housing opportunities within this area. And then supporting healthy businesses and a wide variety of businesses on the corridor. So these are our touchstones. Whenever we have issues, we try to go back and say, is this addressing our goals and our community values? Okay, so a high-level overview of the plan outline, and this will be circulated in draft form here after the new year. We're going to rehash some of what we've talked about today. So how did we get to here? What was the engagement process like? What was the analysis and conclusions of that? What are the opportunities and constraints on the corridor? What shook out of the scenarios analysis? So we ran several scenarios, both land use and transportation scenarios. What did we learn? A lot of the results of that are displayed here in terms of recommendations, but what did that process look like? There's an EIS, planned action, that's accompanying this plan so that we can take care of that with this plan. So an overview of that. And then the real meat of it, which we'll talk about tonight, are what are the implementation strategies and policy recommendations that come out of it. So what are the next steps to implement the plan? So there are 5 major categories, if you will, of strategies, and we're going to talk through each of these in some detail. So there's zoning and development recommendations, affordable housing policy recommendations and strategies, signage and wayfinding recommendations, that also includes the gateway, issues of gateway, treatments, transit recommendations, and then transportation infrastructure recommendations. So a lot of stuff to cover. We'll try to do this rather quickly, and then we can get into detail at the boards on one-on-one basis. So there's a need to update the comprehensive plan to reflect what we learned in this process. So that involves updating how we now view this stretch of corridor in terms of the sub-districts. So there's the Gateway District, International District, and Health District. So we want to update the comprehensive plan to keep it fresh and current to reflect this planning effort. So this will be an update to that. This will be the map highlighting those and then some of the key gateway features that need to be emphasized moving forward. As part of the zoning recommendations, the recommendation right now is to consolidate the 2 commercial zone classes that exist on the corridor. So right now, because we inherited in this area a multitude of zoning classes from the county when it was annexed, there's sort of colors all over the map. And this was an opportunity to think about, is that really reflective of what we heard in the workshop? Are we getting out of the zoning what folks said that they wanted to get? Right now, there's these 2 commercial zones, the CG1 and CG2. The main distinction between the 2 is that one of them allows 60 feet in height, one of them allows 75 feet in height. From a construction typology point of view, it makes sense to consider the 75-foot height limit so that you can get a comfortable 5/1 type construction, so a 6-story mixed-use building in there. So the proposal is to clean this up and to consolidate them into what would be the new CG zone, but it's akin to the CG2 zone. There's also many remnant zones kind of scattered throughout the corridor. One of the posters goes through this in detail. There's an opportunity to clean up the multifamily zones that are adjacent to the corridor. Those were used for buffering, which is the intent of that is obviously clear. You want to have transition from the corridor into the neighborhoods from a design point of view. The approach we're recommending, rather than having multiple zones, is to build in design and massing regulations into the zone, so that a building that sits next to a single-family house is going to have a massing treatment, and there's diagrams in the back, a massing treatment that keeps the bulk away from the single-family zone. So the intent of why there's multiple zones there will be reflected in the design regulations, which we'll go into detail here. So an overview. So you can see it's kind of a technicolor zoning map in here, right? There's a lot of kind of remnant reasons for some of these zones, but the recommendation is to do some cleanup on that and to consolidate many of these into the new CG zone with additional design treatments built into the zone itself. This, incidentally, is actually way more reflective of the comprehensive plan map. So the comprehensive plan map is a lot more clean, and so it's really getting it more closely aligned with the comprehensive plan map. So how do we address the issues of design, which is very important, obviously? There are several ways that the issues of design are addressed in the current code, and many of those are perfectly fine. We wanted to be strategic and only address what we saw as an opportunity to think about better design. So right now, there's a minimum 4-foot wide setback on frontages, on street frontages, and this is a landscape setback, right? So not necessarily a sidewalk, but grass and bushes and things like that. Along Highway 99, the right-of-way is very constrained, and the sidewalk is right up against the road. So we want to think a little bit more creatively about how do we get more sidewalk area and pedestrian friendliness. So that's one area of the code we're going to talk a little bit about. And then there's access to parking. So parking right now, it says no more than 50% of the total project parking spaces may be located between the building's front facade and the primary street. Well, that could mean a lot of parking is between the sidewalk and the building still. If it's 50%. That could be a heck of a lot of parking. So we wanted to think a little bit more intentionally about the design element. So this is an illustration of the current code. So you have your sidewalk right up against the roadway, and with a landscape treatment here. So 4 foot. The idea here is a pedestrian activity zone where you still have the sidewalk, but you have a 10-foot area between the back of the sidewalk and the front of the building. That's the pedestrian activity zone. This allows for businesses to open and sell wares on the street. It allows for sidewalk cafes and more seating, a lot more ample ADA compliance and a walking area. So it essentially allows us to get more pedestrian realm on the side of the street. And this is just a further illustration of that concept. So here's where the sidewalk ends today with the pedestrian activity zone. It would basically add twice as much area for that, so enhancing that area. So that's an illustration of that. So buildings at the street frontage. So this is where we get into some of the urban design of the building itself. So our recommendation right now is that a minimum of 50% of the primary street frontage should have buildings. So not all, right? Not all the street frontage needs to have buildings to have a good sense of place. But 50% of any lot frontage needs to be right up against the sidewalk so that people can access it safely and conveniently from the sidewalk. That's an important urban design recommendation. So transparent ground level windows and doors. So as these buildings get reoriented to the roadway and to the sidewalk, we don't want to end up with just a big blank wall that's very unpleasant to walk by. We want to have active uses and transparent ground floor so that it's a pleasant and interesting, frankly, place to walk. So the location of the parking is obviously important. We recognize that the area is in transition and we still have to accommodate cars, right? So, but we can accommodate them better than the current code does currently. So parking areas, the entire parking lot of a development, say, only 40% of that would be allowed at the front edge, right? So you can have some short-term parking, recognizing that parking's got to be accommodated somewhere, but 60% of it needs to be accommodated in the rear of the building. And that works in tandem with the frontage requirements that we've laid out too. So it orients buildings a lot more towards the sidewalk and parking in the rear of the building. Bulk plane setback regulation. I know that's a mouthful, but this is essentially the way that we are recommending to regulate how the larger urban buildings will taper down into the existing single-family neighborhoods. So it's important to respect the neighbors while also accommodating additional housing opportunities in the area. So this is going to be built right into the zoning code. This is just an example, it's shown on one of the posters, an example of a mixed-use library in our neck of the woods in Portland, one of the suburbs of Portland, where you can see the design treatment, how it steps back from the roadway here. So right now, the current requirements on many of the multifamily areas around the corridor kind of cap out at 25 feet. We want to continue to allow that to happen, but as we think about going higher, make sure that we have a sufficient transition into the adjacent neighborhoods. So for multifamily projects that are adjacent to the corridor, so there's a lot of instances where you have lots that may not be fronting Highway 99, but that are within our study area, and they may look across the street at a single-family home. So the design treatment is very important there. So the recommendation there is to have a 5-foot setback on the street that could have bushes and landscaping, or also more pedestrian amenities, and then begin a tapered back approach so that you're not looking across the street at a wall. You're looking at a tapered building from a single-family home. We're not recommending to change the 15-foot setback from the lot line at the ground level and 10-foot of landscaping buffer if you're immediately adjacent to a single-family home. So if you're right on the lot line with a single-family home, we want to have a little bit more breathing room there. Not recommending any change there. For mixed-use buildings that are adjacent to single-family, there's a little bit of a different play here, so slightly different. Also not recommending any change to the setback. That includes a very dense, a little hard to see on this picture, but a very dense landscaping requirement immediately adjacent to the lot and a 15-foot setback. We are recommending that the height begin to step back at above 25 feet. So the current requirement allows you to build to 25 feet already, right? In these zones, in the current multifamily zones. So we want to allow that tapering to occur. So this is kind of an illustration of what that will look like. We have a very dense landscape buffer here at that 25-foot level, and then you begin to taper the building back for every 25 feet in height. You've got to push that side of the building in 10 feet. That's the basic concept. So this is like the max building you could build within the new CM zone, and currently in the current zone as well, actually. Okay, so transit-supported parking standards. Parking is an important consideration when we talk about mixed use. It's extremely expensive to go underground with parking and to put it into structures. And parking demand for mixed-use projects is generally lower than standalone retail, standalone apartments. So we want to be considerate of that, especially since this is a high-capacity transit corridor. So the transit-supported parking standards, right now, the current parking standards for residential are here. So if you build a studio apartment, you got to put 1.2 parking stalls on average per studio. So if you build a 1-bedroom, 1.5, 2-bedroom, 1.8, so on and so forth. The recommendation is to not look at the bedroom mix necessarily, but on the residential program of the building, of a mixed-use building, the developer has to achieve an average of 0.75 per unit. So some studios that could be very affordable may not, by right, come with a parking stall. Right? There are some folks who just don't want to mess with a car. So this right now doesn't allow for those folks. They still have to pay for it in the rent. So we want to allow for some opportunities for lower cost housing units in this. The commercial recommendation right now, we have a current commercial parking ratio of so non-residential, 2.5 stalls, parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of building area. The recommendation is to shave a little bit off that, go to 2 per 1,000 square feet, with one exception. For smaller retail bays, right, so these would be smaller local shops incorporated into a mixed-use building. with a shared parking plan that shares the parking among the residences and the commercial, you can be exempt from the standard itself. You still have to park it, but you have to work out a shared parking plan that's approved by the city so that parking is available on a short-term basis during the day and at night for residences. Very common practice, the shared parking plan. So there's several tools that we have in our toolbox that we can make use of to expand opportunities to build affordable housing in the corridor. One of the most prominent of those is what's called a multifamily tax abatement or exemption program. So the idea here is that if you're a developer and you want to build a mixed-use building or an apartment building, the city will forgive your property taxes for the residential portion of that building if you agree to incorporate 1/5 of the units into that project at an affordable rate. Right, which is a very, very economical way for the city to generate long-term affordable units. Very, very cost-effective. And it's very cost-effective from the development point of view, too. So it's a very effective program that's been used all across this region, all across the country. We also are recommending that the city pursue a mixed-use, mixed-income demonstration project. Now, we don't know where this would be yet. The details are limited. But the idea here is that the city plays a partnership building role with either a nonprofit builder. The Korean Women's Association, for instance, does these types of mixed-use projects across the region. They identify a site with a willing owner, actively recruit developers. It could be nonprofit or public-private partnership opportunities, cultivate a champion within the community, and get a project out of the ground that is mixed income and mixed use. Now, this has a few benefits. One, it demonstrates that transit-supportive development can happen within the corridor. And that's very important because from an underwriting point of view, the first person to pull the trigger and try to build one of these mixed-use projects is going to have a really steep uphill battle because the comparables in the area are limited. Right? So from a lending point of view and an underwriting point of view, it's very important that the city help nudge that along so that the next person in line has an easier chance to make it happen. So this is a very proactive way the city can get involved in actually implementing the plan. There's a whole host at the state and federal level also of plans or of financing tools, both in terms of affordable housing but also infrastructure financing that we're recommending the city pursue. This is money that the city can take advantage of to implement the plan, essentially. So we're identifying the pockets of money that are available, and there's also proactive measures that the city can take in terms of affordable housing fee waiver programs, identifying funds at the city level that could be made available for redevelopment or affordable housing projects themselves. But obviously, it's always better to use someone else's money, so we're going to try and tee that up too. So there's draft signage and wayfinding recommendations, and you'll see those on the map, in several places on the maps. It's important that we make sure that when people arrive in this stretch of Highway 99 in Edmonds, they know that they have arrived in Edmonds. So the gateway signage proposal at the Highway 104 interchange is really important. There's a transit gateway. There's a whole bunch of opportunities to make 228 an important node of activity, but also connect it both through the use of signage, but also through high-quality bike facilities, and potentially at some point a transit connection over to where the commuter rail will be. Right, that's a very important regional linkage. So that came up again and again and again in the workshops and public engagement. So we want to emphasize that connection a lot. So there's design identity through things like public art. There's already been some headway made on lighting, but there's more, obviously more ground that can be covered there. So street furniture. Once we start to implement the pedestrian activity zone, there's going to be a lot more room for things like street furniture. Right now it's a little tight. Unique bus shelter opportunities. And then thinking more creatively about the signage on the corridor is going to be really important. So there's some examples on the posters about how we can think more creatively, getting away from highway-oriented signs to more of an urban high design standard. But it's not all about transit. Transit's obviously critical to this corridor, but they're a resilient transportation system has a whole bunch of opportunities, and we want to incentivize folks to use car share, incentivize car share to be available and incentivize people to use it, incentivize parking to be integrated within future developments, ride share services, so both public and private. The idea of the sort of sharing economy as it relates to transportation is very much an emerging part of planning, and we ought to be planning for that to be integrated and take advantage of it. Electric car charging stations. So providing incentives that allow these things to be incorporated at no city cost is really going to be important. So I'm going to step through the transportation improvements. There's a lot of very detailed maps that document all the transportation improvements in the back. Also online, all of this material is online as well. Online, there's a project sheet that goes along with those maps, so you can get, if you're nerdy like me and you want to really dig into the details, you can kind of look at the project sheet and learn more about each one of those investments. But as we went through the transportation portion and the transportation investment recommendations, there were several guiding principles that came from the public workshop. So the idea of improving pedestrian safety and access to and from Highway 99 is very important. It's a regional road, but people still use it as their local main street, shopping street. So improving safety and access to it, improving access across it and access to the regional transit facilities that are on it, very important. Making general improvements to the pedestrian environment so that it isn't as hostile a place to be as a pedestrian. So all of these are important for improving the transit mobility and transit access and the general stop environment, right? So we have these really beautiful stops. There's an opportunity that those can be the driver and the focal point for future development and orient around those stops. And then improve predictability and traffic flow to reduce conflicts of people driving. I'm sure everyone in this room has been in a near miss on Highway 99, so that's definitely part of the plan recommendations. More predictable movements. So I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but if there's not, I'll stand back by that map. There's a whole lot of recommendations here, very specific about new bicycle routes, new bicycle lanes, intersection safety and capacity improvements. There's one new traffic signal proposed in that missing gap that we identified earlier. There's access management. This is like landscaped medians, so that you prevent people from just making a left whenever they want to, kind of controlling the flow of traffic, making it very predictable. And then there's pedestrian hybrid signals. So this is like where you don't have a full signal. You have something that people can push a button and have very high visible crossing, right? So this is just the legend that's on the map. That's the range of improvements. And obviously you're not going to be able to read this, but there's a big blow up of it back there, and it's also on the website for further mulling it over and comment. Obviously, we'd like to get detailed comments from folks on this stuff. But just at a high level, these are the existing intersections that are on, this is the north part of the study area. These are the existing intersections that are on, that are in place today. These boxes around here are improvements that make the connections from these roads onto Highway 99 better lighted, safer for pedestrians, because we got a lot of comments that you got people, kind of traveling down Highway 99 at high rate of speed and then zipping off the road, and people are, pushing their stroller and nearly getting hit. So thinking about how improving safety as you get closer and closer to Highway 99 is very important. Also, additional really high quality bike routes with bike lanes, and then kind of lower stress bike routes as well. Not everyone is going to be out there on their Lycra biking at 30 miles an hour. You want to have some kind of low stress bike routes as well. So thinking holistically about how people get across the corridor, but then what's the experience as you travel up and down the corridor as well. And here's the southern end. So here's the only new signal recommendation at this point. As if you recall, there was a big gap here in terms of the safe crossing. And we kind of have an either or here that we're working on, whether or not it's going to be a highly visible pedestrian crossing or a full signal. So feedback on that would be helpful. And again, kind of these connections to the corridor, improving the safety as people and bicyclists approach the corridor. This is one of the strategies we're working on to improve safety at these conflict points. As several people have mentioned that there have been a lot of near misses because people are just whipping right onto Highway 99 right there. So how do we continue to make it predictable and safe for people to drive, but also allow safe movement of vehicles, frankly, and people across that highway interchange? So those are some low cost but really effective solutions as well. And as I said, there's a lot more detail about this on the website, and I'll be available at the map to talk through some of this stuff. So what does it actually mean? What does it actually look like? What's going to be the experience difference along the corridor? So at the gateway to the health district here, this is kind of today, and what the improvements, the crossing improvements, so what are the improvements within the right-of-way? So a lot more highly visible pedestrian refuges in the median there. And also an expanded sidewalk. Remember we talked about the pedestrian activity zone. And then the development that's allowed today actually along the corridor, but with some design treatments so that it fits and works better for the community. Okay, so this is 234 today. So again, you can see much more safe, highly visible crossings. You can see a pedestrian refuge island here, so if you can't quite make it across the street, you don't feel like you have to run to save your life, you can take a break. And then the type of mixed-use development that you can see adjacent to the transit stops there. Okay, so where are we going from here? So we are in the process, as I say, of drafting the plan, still taking recommendations. We want to get this thing refined, and we want to get it into draft form so that we can then get it before a public hearing and receive recommendations from the planning board on December 14th. And we want to get city council review and get their eyes on it in January of 2017, and we're hoping to reach an adoption in the first quarter of 2017, February-ish at this point. Okay? Any questions for the group before? Okay.
3 questions.
Okay.
One is, with the new building, are there plans for underground parking? And if not, why not?
Underground parking is permitted.
Okay. And 2 and 3, when will this begin, and how long will it take?
How long will it take? I can't answer that. I wish I had a crystal ball. These types of roadway improvements don't happen overnight. The city needs to be in a position to go to the legislature and try and accelerate some funding to try and get some state funds. So we're working on making sure that whatever the exact deliverable looks like, they can immediately run out the door and start to get the state excited about making these improvements. From a development point of view, it's anyone's guess. I mean, can't predict that kind of thing. But in terms of when the project we hope to reach adoption at the city level, we are aiming at February of this coming year. Okay, so it's not that far away. Good questions. Yes?
Tell us about parking. I agree with lesser parking. I think we have a bit too much of it up there as it stands. I mean, we see it anytime we pass the Safeway store or numerous other places. But what can we do to protect the neighborhoods from people parking in the neighborhoods overnight if they can't get parking in their residential? What do you do generally to prevent parking in the residential areas?
Sure. So you can post and enforce. You can post parking hours and enforce. You can create a parking district that targets and prioritizes residences. There's a whole bunch of policies that you can do. But I will say that in a lot of these neighborhoods, there's opportunities to probably also to better utilize the on-street parking that you have too. So it's a fine balance, right? It's a fine balance. If it gets to be a problem, then I would say it's time to regulate it. But until it gets to be a problem, it's a resource that's there and available and ought to be as efficiently used as we can make it. right? So,
Thanks.
good question, yeah.
I've got two questions. One is, what about existing small businesses that are there, such as down the street, the secondhand store that's there?
Mhm.
I noticed in your picture there, you showed it's gone. It becomes history, which I don't kind of like the idea of telling the people, you gotta move out. So that's the first thing.
Sure.
The second is on affordable housing, on the poster it says for only the first 12 years, which passes very quickly if you're there, and suddenly as the property becomes more valuable and more people come here, suddenly you've got to move out.
Mhm.
So I'd like to see that in perpetuity as opposed to only a certain time limit. But please,
Sure. So with regard to local businesses, I mean, a plan like this certainly does not tell anyone they have to do anything different with their property. This
what if
gives
they're
this-
renting the business there?
I mean, we're not really in the business of telling people exactly what they can or can't do. We're providing options for what they can do, right? I mean, there's options today, right? I mean, you can build 60 feet, 75 feet in a lot of the corridor today. So we're trying to make the design of the buildings better and make it more economical for folks. But I mean, we just generally can't get in the business of telling folks that they can and can't do exactly with their land. I mean,
I guess I'd like to see something put in there to protect existing businesses. If the
Mhm.
building's going to be changed, to allow them the chance to continue instead of saying, you're out of here.
yeah, well, one of the policies that's in here as it relates to the parking requirements for the smaller retail. That's exactly what that's for. That's tailored to try and make it more economical. Because I tell you, building a new mixed-use building is expensive, right? And so what we want to do is have policies that carve out places within these new mixed-use buildings for local businesses. So that's an effort to preserve the opportunities of local, smaller, mom-and-pop places to be reincorporated into a new and better building. So we're definitely cognizant of that. With the affordable housing issue, some of that's governed by state law. We will. I hear you though, and so we're not. The intention is to preserve affordable housing for as long as we can do it. So we'll take a look at it and see if there's anything we can do about it. But some of that is governed by state law.
What's the law?
So the tax abatement program generally is in this state is available for 12 years. Well, I'll take a look at it with city staff and see if there's any room to roam on that. So point well taken. Yeah.
One thing I noticed that you're proposing a lot of intensification and densification. One thing I did not see is the open space, public park, where people can go and do things in parks.
So good question. The connections that we've proposed in here, I think will make the great regional park resources and trail resources that you have a lot more visible and a lot more useful and known to people. So there's already a lot of stuff that's just kind of diamond in the rough that a lot of folks don't know about. So making better use of that and making safer connections to that is really important. That said, the city has an opportunity to look for new park investments in here. We were looking at transportation and zoning. I think you're absolutely right. Adding density, you need plazas and places for people to gather. So I think everyone in here is on the same page with that. And I think it's probably a priority of the city as well. So, making sure that it's reflected in the broader planning arrangement is really good. Our focus is a little bit more narrow, but
I mean, if you're going to make something, try to make it livable and walkable, not everybody wants to go shop. Part of it's just hanging out and just, going to places where it's common quiet, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
It seems like if you're trying to create the three legs of the stool,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd say these proposals came out of the workshop and the public feedback that we got. So these aren't my ideas per se. I mean, these are ideas that were generated by the Edmonds public. And the idea related to open space was how do we better use the open space we have? That was just the idea that came out of the public process. So strengthening the connections, making them a lot more visible. I mean, you've got this amazing urban trail, you've got this amazing park, amazing parks on both sides. How do you strengthen the connections to those? I think was the recommendation that lived on in this planning process. Yeah.
So we have some really big shopping centers like Ranch 99 and Burlington and all these car dealerships. What do we do about all that kind of stuff?
Well, they are probably going to be alive and well for a while, but this plan would enable them to become something different if they so choose. So again, we can't be prescriptive about what when a building owner decides they want to do something different. All we want to do is make sure that the regulations are set up in such a way that the community gets what they want out of it. So, great question, but we have limited authority over what they can do with their building.
So will there be incentives?
Yeah. The incentives, both in terms of just a better development process, but also the incentives we talked about in terms of if it all goes according to plan. The multifamily housing tax abatement program will make it a lot more attractive to do mixed use and to add more residential to the corridor. And we've proposed incorporating fee waivers, again, not just for every project willy-nilly, but for the projects that are reflective of the values in the plan. Yes?
Yeah, those of us who live between 99 and 76 put up with lots of through traffic. And it's a lot of speeding. Seattle just reevaluated their speed limits and they're making modifications and changes. Does this plan include that speed limit based on the traffic flows that we're now seeing with 228, bigger density on 99 and 76th and up on the hill? I mean, we're seeing a real increase in through traffic, people who don't live here.
And they're going the speed limit, and the speed limit's too high.
They're going
exceeding the speed limit.
Down 236, they just roar down 236 from 99 to 76 in that direction, or even up the hill. I live on 236, so I know that area pretty intimately. And a lot of us are concerned about if there's going to be any speed limit evaluations or studies done in the area based on the changes that you're making, and if there's going to be speed bumps involved or, speed limit adjustments.
Right. So there are there's a couple things there, and we'll take another question or two, and then we can kind of break up and go over this in more detail one-on-one. But there's a couple things here. So the access management, that's the term of the trade, but the sort of landscape medians that help predictable left turn movements, they help prevent people from just willy-nilly taking a left turn into your neighborhood and zooming through, right? So access to and from the highway is a very important part of the plan. There's also an opportunity to increase enforcement. It sounds like maybe it's not necessarily posted speed, but maybe it's just people kind of pushing the law a little bit. So I think from a design perspective on the roadway, there's less opportunity for people to just cut straight into the neighborhood, right, with the access management. But I'll work with the city staff to see if there's an opportunity to think about enforcement on some of the roads. Okay. So any other burning questions for the group? I'll take those. But again, we're going to be available for folks at the,
Yeah, I'd be concerned about learning some lessons from the median landscaping in Shoreline. I mean, the lanes are regularly blocked off to maintain that landscaping, and it really causes a big backup. And we've got a much shorter number of miles. So yeah. I think we should look at at low maintenance types of plantings.
It's a really good point, and that was one of the lessons that they shared with us in their experience. Okay. So it's definitely on our radar. So I appreciate that. Yes. Okay. So. Questions are not done, but I want to allow folks who need to take off, or folks who want to meet up with us at the boards to ask further questions. I'll be available, so I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much.